Hello, I'm Nancy Fox Adele, and my current scholarship looks at the way that online forums can serve as high impact practices by creating community in our classes. In this particular presentation, I'm going to look at the ways that my public writing classes created a public journal as a high impact practice as they were reading Claudia Rankine's Citizen in American Lyric. One of the students in that class, Tana, wrote that Citizen in American Lyric is a bold account of racial aggression. Claudia Rankine tells us, I started working on Citizen as a way of talking about invisible racism, moments that you experience that happen really fast. Citizen was the common read at my university, the University of West Florida, in spring 2021. And in that text, Rankine documents the relationship between incidents that go by really fast at lightning speed and acts of racial hostility and violence in both the pages of American history and active in our communities today. The eye of her story moves from everyday settings of classroom, office, sport, and store to the silent skies above the victims lynched for amusement or shot on an evening shopping trip for Skittles. One of my students, Nicholas, wrote very tellingly, whether we like it or not, racism has been a major piece, not just of American history, but world history too. Citizen is a composition of artwork, critique, essay, film, narrative, photography, poetry, poster, script, and sculpture. The topic and the text work together to show how we view one another through the lens of a world constructed as white, and everyone perceived as different from that paradigm is denied full status as citizen. Claudia Rankine's stated purpose, to help us see one another as human beings, is intrinsic to our ethic of teaching, no matter our field of study or school. It's like a call to action, writes Hannah, one of the students involved in creating this public journal, to be open about racial issues and fight for justice. This discussion will present some ways that teaching Citizen can foster this awareness in classes, not only in this public writing class, which is our demonstration here, but across the entire university curriculum. Students who involved themselves in this journal experienced a process of learning from one another that actually changed their minds and their lives. Racism is institutional, we know, but institutions are made up of people, Rankine tells us. So what are those 1,000 cuts that lead to the big institutional fails around racism? I asked people who I knew, friends, other colleagues, to just tell me moments where they were going along in their day and suddenly somebody said or did something that reduced them to their race. And so I collected these stories, rewrote them, and got to the heart of what I was trying to portray. Specifically, what I'll present today are the reflections of the students who engaged in this critical inquiry of Citizen together and created a genre of journal writing, and in fact called it that themselves, named what they were doing a public journal, because it was public. It was not a private journal. It was public, and it was collective in their purposes and in the composition. And also, the intent is to highlight the public journal as a high impact practice in our classrooms. And that's why it matters as a pedagogy, but you'll also see how it matters to these students on a personal and a political level. Claudia Rankine makes the point at the conclusion of Citizen that it wasn't a match, I say, it was a lesson. And in this way, she defines her text in classical terms that come directly to us from Cicero, that have also defined our rhetorical intent as a profession, docere, to teach. What is the lesson? What have you learned? Are questions that confront students of this text. And it is through answering those questions that they forge their connections to one another, but also a deeper understanding of this topic and of one another, and the experiences of other people in a society with a deeply embedded current distortion of racism. Jackie, an author of the Public Journal, tells us that Rankine implores the white reader to reflect upon racism, to open their mind to different experiences of racism, and to analyze their own contributions toward racism. The community in our English class worked with this text through self-assessments, through microaggression discussions, analysis of images, to expand upon Rankine's lessons. Her colleague Pressy adds to that assessment. Now that I have read Citizen, I understand the full extent of how cruel people can be and how important it is to be a light of kindness in all of that cruelty. Everyone should have the right to happiness and feel like they belong because we all belong here. Since Rankine began her exploration and her portrayal of racism with the microaggression, the masked compliment with the intention to harm someone. You're really smart for a blonde, aren't you? Or a seemingly minor action that is intended to make someone feel inferior or marked. You sit over there, and we'll sit over here. She said, I started working on Citizen as a way of talking about invisible racism, moments that you experience that happen really fast and go by at lightning speed, and you begin to distrust that they even happened, yet you feel bad somehow. We began our exploration writing about microaggression that we ourselves had experienced in our own lives. Here is a graphic of microaggression that I made to depict an experience of my daughter, Chloe, when she was in kindergarten. And it's superimposed on an image from Citizen. Here was Chloe's story. Francesca said, why are you so dirty looking? Do you roll around in the mud? And that was the first time. Like, what did you just say? I didn't have the words for what she said, but I knew it was bad or wrong on a deeper level, more than an insult. I was 4. Here is the prompt from our class PowerPoint that set everyone up for their writing about microaggressions. We defined microaggression, and they were asked to choose one that they themselves had experienced or witnessed, and to talk about how it made them feel. And I thought it was important to have them focus on the event. The perpetrator would be obvious in the event and would be revealed in the event. But looking at the event rather than the person built some perspective into their accounts. Here are three. One was, I was the smart girl. I valued different things, and excluding me hurt. One was a young person who came out as gay. But you don't look gay. I didn't feel included anywhere. And one was from a student who had a scalp issue from surgery and was mocked and excluded. Whoa, you're a chick. And all I felt was embarrassment and shame. Microaggression, embarrassment and shame. Marking someone as different, excluding them. This is the prompt that carried us through a month of working and thinking and writing together in creating this journal. The question was posed by Rankine at the beginning of her book, what actually was happening? Given the depth and the range of the incidents and issues that she presents, that Rankine presents, the question, what is the lesson, can be easily and productively aligned with the forums, and they can be forums across the curriculum. Students are invited here to think critically in posts or projects that they present to one another in response to specific moments in the text that speak to our interests and our topics in our courses. The forums can further explore core values of decency and humanity in our university community. When someone says they are discriminated against or hurt by your actions, you need to take that as fact, said one of the students, Sierra. It doesn't matter if you think what you did was hurtful. It hurt the other person, and that's all that matters. Here is the response part of the journal, where the writers read one another's posts and were asked to respond to one another, even if they were to disagree, even if, as they said later, the topics were difficult and challenging, and that they weren't topics they thought they could ever talk about publicly with other people, and they realized they were wrong. They were asked to remember courtesy and remember friendship and alliance. And what you hear is my Yorkie right here with me, not exactly exhibiting friendship to the dog that she sees out the window. Here are three examples from the weeks of posts that the student authors shared with one another. From Bradley, the simple act of existing as a black man can be seen by others as a threat, when the only ones who are in danger are those who are black. From Tiana, my people, black people, are dying. And from Kantia, you start to wonder, did they leave this person here to die? Yes. Yes, they did. What I loved about Citizen is how it places you in the story. The majority of the story poems refer to you, then you are stretched out on the hood, then cuffed. Get on the ground now. Through Rankine's insertion of the reader, we can feel the pain. And what did students say they learned from working on this public journal? Well, the impact of these processes is clear in their reflections. Tiana, one of the students involved, described the transformative effect of the inquiry and the community that she created with all these other students. The people in this course give me hope for our future. If a student who came into this class not understanding the severity of racism and prejudice toward Black Americans will leave this course, they would have a better understanding, and will future students share that understanding? That's what we hope for. Gerard's writing here gave us the title of this presentation, Working Through This Uneasiness Together. Here he expresses his thoughts and his feelings after realizing that these were topics that he could talk about with other students, and they could talk about these topics with him. And through that, they could deepen their understanding, obviously, of the topic itself, but also reach connection with one another. I think by working through this uneasiness together, we were all able to come out of our shells and write what we truly felt. We want connection. We want understanding. We want intimacy. But if the terms of that intimacy feel dishonest, or feel only possible with the acceptance of your erasure, then that's painful. I think you can see through the work that the students did together and through what they wrote to one another that the public journal they created embodies high impact practices that have come to define the most effective means of engaging our students and keeping them engaged so that they see their education through and graduate and feel meaning in their lives. They collaborated, they created a diverse learning community, they engaged in discussion with me and with other teachers, because this was not the only class that was working with this particular text. They had writing intensive experiences. They wrote to each other all the time for 4 weeks straight about this. And they shared this common intellectual experience. We're writing, researching deep subjects, said Hannah. George Q., who is the Yoda of high impact practices, has a scale that he calls the Deep Integrative Learning Scale, which contains the elements that compose the high impact practices. What do we want to see our students doing that are meaningful in the classes? And the public journal involves all of them. Everything on this list is an integral part of the public journal that they created. And that can transfer to other classes, other subjects, other sorts of journals, as long as students are creating it together. Because the crux of the matter here is that students are the integral collaborators in this story. This isn't my project, it's their project. And their engagement gives this work that we did its integrity and its reason. They created this pedagogy even as they engaged in it. The practices that we call high impact provide a framework and a design for understanding the impact on our students through a project like this one. They comprise deep learning and engagement, and two values intrinsic to this are inquiry and community. And you see that throughout this project. As students explored the complexities of this multifaceted text, they forged connection and understanding that Rankine made possible through this deeply personal book, Citizen. We're reminded again of what Hannah said at the beginning of this presentation. It's like a call to action to be open about racial issues and fight for justice. An extremely important thought coming from someone, the younger generation, saying it now, in this time. It gives us a glimpse of what the future is. Many students noted that the fact the journal was online gave them a space, gave them confidence, gave them a sense of being able to speak that they might not and probably would not have felt in an open physical classroom space. So I can only say that the online forum has the capacity to enable confidence and a voice to all students. It gives them room to express their ideas, express their opinions, develop their thinking, which writing does. Writing does that naturally. And I think that it's time for us to look at the potential of the online forum in creating a public journal like this one, and who knows what other kinds of creations our students can come up with. They came up with this themselves, and they came up with the title for it too. If they're given a space that they own, but also where they feel respected, the impacts that I listed earlier, they were impacts that the students noted themselves, that they felt like they had a safe space where they could talk, and they wanted to share their ideas with one another. And of course, the most significant contribution of this is that the students created this themselves. This is an idea that they all share. They all express this point of view. If we can make connections, we can make a difference in our lives and in the lives of others. If you would like to hear more about this data and this public journal that the students created and other online forums that they've engaged in, my email is nedel@uwf.edu, and I am very happy to hear from you.